Okay. So February then?
I was a TA. I was a new and a TA. No. So that was not normal.
Yeah, that's so not helpful. Good for you.
No, that's a good example.
Wow.
So unhelpful.
I know. I'm very proud of you.
I was just thinking how marvelous it is that all y'all did was just talk and share, and yet I feel so happy seeing that. And so thank y'all for doing that and for building community in such a wonderful way.
Feels nice.
Right? It feels really good. And so, and it is a reminder to me that, sometimes I'll be engaging in something else, but other people watching me may be thinking something else. And so y'all are talking away, but here I am thinking, how wonderful these people are. So thank y'all. So tonight is our parable service. We're going to talk about another ancient parable that has different roots and has different versions. And so Leon has been very kind and generous to sift through some of these and pick one that we'll use for tonight. Before we go on, so I don't forget, and it's fresh in my mind, after this, we'll have only one more meeting for the year. So it'll be December 6th, will be the first Tuesday of December. I will discuss then the third noble truth then. We'll take a break for December and January and start up again in February, kind of coincide with the Lunar New Year. It won't be exactly then, but the first Tuesday of February is when we'll go ahead and look at starting up again. And we'll be starting with the Eightfold Path, which is part of the Fourth Noble Truth. Okay, which was very appropriate. Sort of start the new year with lessons about how the Buddha prescribes we should act in order to suffer less, to find peace, and to find that middle way, that balance. And it can guide us as it'll be a good time right around the time you're giving up on your New Year's resolutions. You can get renewed inspiration on living a more balanced life through the lessons of the Eightfold Path. Okay? All right, so because today is our parable service, the way we do this is I'll do a very quick guided meditation to help sort of bring us into the present moment, be more aware of our surroundings and where we are at. Then we'll have Leon read the parable to us. After the reading of the parable, we'll do a short silent meditation. And typically when we do instructions for meditation, I ask you to focus on the breath. But for the parable service, I ask you to focus on the story, to allow the story to sink in, to sit with the story. And the way the reason I describe it as sinking in and sitting with the story is, it's not something that, it's not like an analytical work and you need to come up with a dissertation or an essay after your contemplation of this parable. It's about sitting with the story and just observing what arises within you, what emotions, what thoughts, simply what bubbles up, and allowing yourself to experience, to observe what it is that's bubbling up within you. Okay. After we do the meditation where you sit with the parable, then we'll do we'll probably read the parable one more time and just open it up for discussions. Okay? Great. If there are no questions, get in a comfortable position as I guide you through a short centering meditation. Take 3 deep breaths. Each breath deeper and slower than the last. Now let the breath go. Let it do what it pleases. And focus instead on the sounds and sensations outside of your body. Now focus on the sensations within. Your breath, your heartbeat. Now return your focus on the sensations outside your body. The sounds, movements, the breath of others. Now take 3 deep breaths. And when you're ready, open your eyes.
We'll see if we can do this gently for the sake of our folks online. Hopefully they won't make too much noise moving this microphone. Good evening, everyone. I am ready to read a parable for you, a story that, as we've talked about before, sometimes they're very simple stories with simple elements that tell a really much deeper meaning. So hopefully this will be, you can find some benefit in the story. The name of the story is The Cruel Crane Outwitted. A tailor who used to make robes for the Brotherhood was wont to cheat his customers and thus prided himself on being smarter than other men. But once, on entering an important business transaction with a stranger, he met his master in the way of cheating and suffered a heavy loss. The Blessed One said, "This is not an isolated incident in the greedy tailor's fate. In other incarnations, he suffered similar losses, and by trying to dupe others, ultimately ruined himself. This same greedy character lived many generations ago as a crane near a pond. And when the dry season set in, he said to the fishes with a bland voice, 'Are you not anxious for your future welfare? There is at present very little water and still less food in this pond. What will you do should the whole pond become dry?' 'Yes, indeed,' said the fishes. 'What should we do?' Replied the crane, 'I know a fine large lake which never becomes dry. Would you not like me to carry you there in my beak?' When the fishes began to distrust the honesty of the crane, he proposed to have one of them sent over to the lake to see it, and a big carp at last decided to take the risk for the sake of the others. And the crane carried him to a beautiful lake and brought him back safely. Then all doubt vanished, and the fishes gained confidence in the crane. And now the crane took them one by one out of the pond and devoured them on a big varana tree. There was also a lobster in the pond, and when the crane wanted to eat him too, he said, 'I have taken all the fishes away and put them in a fine large lake. Come along, I shall take you too.' 'But how will you hold me to carry me along?' asked the lobster. 'I shall take hold of you with my beak,' said the crane. 'You will let me fall if you carry me like that. I will not go with you,' replied the lobster. 'You need not fear,' rejoined the crane. 'I shall hold you quite tight all the way.' Then the lobster said to himself, 'If this crane once gets hold of a fish, he will certainly never let him go in a lake. Now, if he should really put me in the lake, it would be splendid. But if he does not, then I will cut his throat and kill him.' So he said to the crane, 'Look here, friend, you will not be able to hold me tight enough, but we lobsters have a famous grip. If you let me catch hold of you around the neck with my claws, I shall be glad to go with you.' The crane did not see that the lobster was trying to outwit him, and agreed. So the lobster caught hold of his neck with his claws as securely as with a pair of blacksmith's pincers, and called out, 'Ready, ready, go!' The crane took him and showed him the lake, then turned off toward the varana tree. 'My dear uncle,' cried the lobster, 'the lake lies that way, but you are taking me this other way.' Answered the crane, 'Think so? Am I your dear uncle? You want me to understand, I suppose, that I am your slave who has to lift you up and carry you about with him wherever you please. Now cast your eye on that heap of fish bones at the root of yonder varana tree. Just as I have eaten those fish, every one of them, just so will I devour you also.' 'Ah, those fishes got eaten through their own stupidity,' answered the lobster. 'But I am not going to let you kill me. On the contrary, it is you that I am going to destroy. For you in your folly have not seen that I have outwitted you. If we die, we both die together, for I will cut off this head of yours and cast it to the ground.' So saying, he gave the crane's neck a pinch with his claws as with a vice. Then, gasping and with tears trickling from his eyes and trembling with the fear of death, the crane besought the lobster, saying, 'Oh, my lord, indeed I did not intend to eat you. Grant me my life.' 'Very well, fly down and put me into the lake,' replied the lobster. And the crane turned round and stepped down into the lake to place the lobster on the mud at its edge. Then The lobster cut the crane's neck through as clean as one would have cut a lotus stalk with a hunting knife, and then entered the water. When the teacher had finished this discourse, he added, "Now not only was this man outwitted in this way, but in other existences too, by his own intrigues." do this, really.
We believe in you.
Yeah. All right. Let's breeze through this one more time just so everybody has it freshly in their minds. The cruel crane outwitted. A tailor who used to make robes for the Brotherhood was wont to cheat his customers and thus prided himself on being smarter than most men. But once, on entering an important business transaction with a stranger, he met his master in the way of cheating and suffered a heavy loss. The Blessed One said, "This is not an isolated incident in the greedy tailor's fate. In other incarnations, he suffered similar losses, and by trying to dupe others, ultimately ruined himself. The same greedy character lived many generations ago as a crane near a pond. And when the dry season set in, he said to the fishes with a bland voice, Are you not anxious for your future welfare? There is at present very little water and still less food in this pond. What would you do should the whole pond become dry in this drought?" "Yes, indeed," said the fishes. "What should we do?" Replied the crane. "I know a fine large lake. Fine large lake, which never becomes dry. Would you not like me to carry you there in my beak?" When the fishes began to distrust the honesty of the crane, he proposed to have one of them sent over to the lake to see it, and a big carp at last decided to take the risk for the sake of the others, and the crane carried him to a beautiful lake and brought him back in safety. Then all doubt vanished, and the fishes gained confidence in the crane. And now the crane took them one by one out of the pond and devoured them on a big varana tree. There was also a lobster in the pond, and when the crane wanted to eat him too, he said, "I have taken all the fishes away and put them in a fine large lake. Come along, I shall take you too." "But how will you hold me to carry me along?" asked the lobster. "I shall take hold of you with my beak," said the crane. "You will let me fall if you carry me like that. I will not go with you," replied the lobster. "You need not fear," rejoined the crane. "I shall hold you quite tight all the way." Then said the lobster to himself, "If this crane once gets hold of a fish, he will certainly never let go of it in a lake. Now, if he should really put me into the lake, it would be splendid. But if he does not, then I will cut his throat and kill him." So he said to the crane, "Look here, friend. You will not be able to hold me tight enough, but we lobsters have a famous grip. If you will let me catch hold of you around the neck with my claws, I shall be glad to go with you." The crane did not see that the lobster was trying to outwit him, and he agreed. Then the lobster caught hold of his neck with his claws as securely as with a pair of blacksmith's pincers and called out, "Ready, ready, go!" The crane took him and showed him the lake, and then turned off toward the varana tree. "My dear uncle," cried the lobster, "the lake lies that way, but you are taking me this other way." Answered the crane, "Think so? Am I your dear uncle? You want me to understand, I suppose, that I am your slave who has to lift you up and carry you about with him where you please. Now cast your eye on that heap of fish bones at the root of yonder varana tree. Just as I have eaten those fish, every one of them, so I will devour you also." "Ah, those fishes got eaten through their own stupidity," answered the lobster. "But I am not going to let you kill me. On the contrary, it is you that I am going to destroy. For you in your folly have not seen that I have outwitted you. If we die, we both die together, for I will cut off this head of yours and cast it to the ground." So saying, he gave the crane's neck a pinch with his claws as with a vice. Then, gasping, with tears trickling from his eyes and trembling with the fear of death, the crane besought the lobster, saying, "Oh, my lord, indeed I did not intend to eat you. Grant me my life." "Very well, fly down and put me into the lake," replied the lobster. And the crane turned round and stepped down into the lake to place the lobster on the mud at its edge. Then the lobster cut the crane's neck through as clean as one would cut a lotus stalk with a hunting knife, and then entered the water. When the teacher had finished this discourse, he added, "Not now only was this man outwitted in this way, but in other existences too, by his own intrigues."
So now I'll just open it up. What are some thoughts, questions, comments, insights? What bubbled up for you as you sat with this parable?
I'd like to share what came up for me. And it feels so uncomfortable, actually, but I feel like I need to say this. So like for the first 39 years of my life, I feel like I was always this very manipulative, self-serving person that took advantage of anybody that came my way. And it was like that for most of my life. I lured people in with like just the way that I spoke or certain tactics or whatever. And in the end, people could see me for what I was. They shunned me and they're like, could see through my behavior. My friends didn't want to have anything to do with me. My family didn't want to have anything to do with me. My bosses didn't want to have anything to do with me. And I felt like in the end, I kind of got caught. And I was being viewed kind of like under a microscope, and everyone could see the real truth of who I truly was. And I remember in that moment just feeling like I just want another chance, just give me a chance, please just trust me this time. Like I'm gonna change. No one believed anything that I said. And it was then that I realized that I needed to look at myself in the mirror for the first time in my life and look at myself in a way that I had never looked at and be willing to change one thing, and that was everything. I'm grateful for my path thus far because all the pain and the suffering that I've endured and all the things that I've done to people in the past have been able to give me like so much wisdom in my life today. I used to have regrets about the way that I treated people and the things that I've done. But now, I'm just grateful for everything that's happened thus far in my life. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, or I was able to explain it in any way to where you could see what was going on in my mind, but I tried my best, so thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.
I think one of the most salient things about the parable is like when you're trying to be sneaky or bad or whatever the word is and it backfires, right? But I was thinking about, what about when you're the lobster in life? Like, what do you do when you know somebody is acting not nobly or whatever? You know, like the lobster maybe could have had empathy, but he was the one that was trying to be like tricked and whatnot. I don't know. It doesn't really have a point, but that's what stood out to me personally.
I like the difference between dealing with a group of fish as opposed to dealing one-on-one with a lobster. There's a different dynamic there. And so it's like groupthink with the fish, because the crane pitched them on his idea, and then they had to go away and kind of talk about it, and then they had to decide together whether they trusted him or not. So that like, okay, we're all in. Once the brave fish went with him and came back safely. Even then, they all had to talk about amongst each other and decide whether they trusted the crane or not. And then with the lobster, it just seemed like a different thing altogether. Because the lobster, maybe he had some suspicions because he'd seen the crane carrying them away one by one, but he wasn't sure until they got in the air and veered away from the lake. Until that point, he was like, maybe he's going to take me to the lake, right? So you don't know what's going to happen. Just a different dynamic, because we got to see what the fishes might have been thinking, as he carried them off, but we didn't know until we got to the lobster, and then we see it from his point of view as well. It's kind of different.
Almost like he met his match.
But that's my point. The whole two wrongs don't make a right. Like the lobster killed him then, right? Like he had just been set down in the lake. He could have just chilled. But he decided to.
He messed with the wrong one, in a sense, because I think that, like, I was thinking about what karma is, and I was trying to think of it as some sort of, like, at first I was maybe like an external force, like something that's sent down or to you to set things right. But then I realized that the lobster, or not the lobster, the crane, kind of brought about his own demise with that decision to, or not decision, but he overlooked the fact that he was just thinking like, I got the lobster has agreed to go with me to the lake. But he overlooked the neck thing.
Right.
And
It's a big one.
he could have been sharper. He could have realized what was going on. But in his over eagerness, in his over, like, he overleaping himself.
Overconfidence, right? He just decimated all the fish. It's like, I'm on a roll here,
He planted the seed for his own demise. And I was thinking maybe karma, rather than seeing it as like an external force, maybe even an element of it is like an internal, like a self-regulating mechanism. Maybe like we self-sabotage ourselves somehow.
It's conscious.
But anyway.
Maybe some ego as well. I can outsmart, but remember, as smart as you think you are, there's always someone that might be smarter than you.
Yeah, your ego tells you I'm the smartest one,
So
period.
I think
Nobody can
he
outsmart
was
me.
the smartest one, but then somebody.
Like I
else
said,
came
especially
up
after
with it.
he'd already eaten all the fish, he's thinking, I'm really smart.
Yeah.
Arrogance to get in the way.
Exactly.
And no self limitations. I mean, he could have been happy eating all the fish that he had.
Exactly, that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I've got all the fish now, I have some lobster for second course.
I would have started with lobster.
He would have just ended very quickly.
Yeah.
I'll take this home and make a few edits.
The moral of the story is eat lobster first.
Goodness. I just think it's amazing, it's such a simple story, because actually, as I was researching this, I found a version of it on a site that was fairy tales for children, right? So it just shows that, we're all children, really. We're all still learning our lesson.
And so it's a lesson of this one that everyone gets their comeuppance.
Gets their comeuppance? In a way, yeah. I think that's what karma tells us, that you can skate along fine for a while, but causes and conditions may or may not catch up with you. Maybe not for 1,000 years, but sooner or later.
And so because the crane, I guess, kept doing this through other lives, his karma kept repeating itself. He never fixed it, per se.
I think maybe that's true, that, he could have said, he could have made a decision, well, those fish look really good, but I'm not gonna try to trick them. I'll just do a crane thing and just eat as many as I can. Not try to use the confusion of telling him you're going to take them to a big lake.
And so then because we're on the Second Noble Truth Month, his desire, his attachment to wanting to eat all those fish, that pleasurable feeling, brought him bad karma and ultimately did him in. And just like when he was a person, his desire to cheat people, probably for money or whatever reason, did him in as well.
And he was cheating in a way that nobody was noticing it, right? So he's making robes for the monks, and somehow he managed with the material or whatever he was doing to, make some extra money off of it.
You see that now when these nonprofits are like, oh, help us with money, but like March of Dimes, for instance, for every dollar that they get, only one dime actually goes into the charity. This is why it's called March of Dimes. Anyone know that? So the CEO gets 95 cents for every dollar that's donated. So this is kind of the same way you're using a good cover story to do your bad deeds.
Wasn't that why they say don't donate to the Red Kettle this time of the year? Because Salvation Army, I think, keeps it or something.
All these charities, unfortunately. The only way to help is to help directly, not through something.
I thought his reaction was interesting too when he realizes that the lobster got the better of him. He didn't. He still lied. He was like, no, I didn't mean to do that. He compensated with the lie to kind of like.
What's the fear?
Panic, yeah.
What he felt the fear?
I'm not sure.
He wasn't afraid of the lobster, or he wasn't afraid of the fish.
Yeah.
He should have been afraid of the lobster, right?
Yeah, but
He
then
should have looked at the lobster and said, that guy could hurt me.
Imagining a lobster holding a crane, you can't imagine it. It's a children's story. Yeah. It's a children's story.
That's right.
Tying it back to the second noble truth, desire. The desire to want to eat isn't a bad desire, so that wasn't a bad desire from the crane. The desire to get ahead from the merchant, to improve one's life position, that's not a bad desire. It's how you go about fulfilling those desires that can create suffering for you, suffering for others, karma. You can pick almost any bad act, and there is a desire that's in it of itself not necessarily bad, but how it's expressed is important. Is it going to create more suffering? Is it going to reduce suffering? Am I getting ahead at the expense of another? Or am I learning that I will get ahead when my neighbor gets ahead? And that we get further together in a sangha than trying to go at it on our own, or try to go at it by taking advantage of others. At the root of our suffering is desire. That's where it starts. What you do with it is what then brings about either more suffering or less suffering. Think of any act that was less than noble that you have engaged in. And chances are underneath it was a good desire. But the expression of that desire created suffering. This week I've been working with a lot of people who, for some reason, this must be breakup season. I'm working with a lot of people who are going through bad breakups. The desire to connect, the desire to be with another. In that instance, it can lead us to blind ourselves and make decisions that aren't always the healthiest. And just like the crane, the desire to eat, the desire to have some good lobster, made the crane put itself in a position where the lobster had its claws wrapped around its neck, and he was blind to the situation he was in. So sometimes our desires, though the underlying desire is good, the intensity of that desire, allowing ourselves to be seduced by that desire, blinds us, makes us ignorant. The desire to be in a lake that would not dry up. Oh yeah, I can trust Mr. Crane here, so I can go to this really awesome place.
Never seen it, but
Never seen it. But that desire blinded them to the fact that the crane is a crane. I asked you all over the last 2 weeks to think about whenever you're suffering, what is the underlying desire? If you go back, if you look again, you'll see that the underlying desire probably was not a bad desire. But in how it was being expressed, how it was being reached for, longed for, strived for, was a way that was cultivating suffering. It did not match reality in some way. And so you suffered. The lesson is not do away with desires. It's be mindful of the desire. Be mindful of the expression of that desire. Be mindful of the blindness that comes from being seduced by our desires. It's not get rid of the desire. Just be aware of it. What eventually that leads to then is, hey, there is a way out of this. That's the third noble truth that we'll discuss on December 6th. And the way, the prescription, what do we do with these desires, is part of the Eightfold Path, that fourth noble truth. How do we express them in a way that is noble? How do we express them in a way that is healthy? How do we express them in a way that reduces and hopefully at some point eliminate suffering? So I encourage you again, anytime you suffer, anytime you're feeling miserable, ask yourself, what is the underlying desire? And how is the expression of that desire not matching reality? Any other thoughts, questions? The insight about karma is very good. I haven't mentioned karma much. We haven't talked about it. Eventually I'll get to the topic of karma. So we may be able to revisit the story then. But the story has a lot to say about karma. But we'll get to that, one thing at a time.
Is there something in there about blind trust? The fish, for example.
Oh, that's a good one. I hadn't thought about it that way.
So the catfish went there, came back safely. So the catfish, from his perspective, is like, yeah, this is bona fide. This is good. And the fishes
Yes.
just went along, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They
It's a good point. I like that. And that should apply
Their
also.
desire led them to have that blind faith.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Right.
be as cautious as they should have been. Their desire was so strong to be in a lake with lots of water and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff.
I wonder if they were aware of the fact that they were in danger. I wonder if they really weren't in danger. He convinced them that they were in danger. But
Yeah.
I wonder if they were really truly in danger. Maybe the lake they were in was okay.
Like they say,
Mhm.
sometimes people have the gift of gab, where they
Mhm.
people to, talk to you and you're blindsided and you believe them. So
Yeah.
Exactly. I think this crane was good at gab.
Yeah.
Sounds like a cult leader.
Mm-hmm.
Gab
a
crane.
politician.
Or a politician.
Yeah.
Or even me. It's important to always remember, no matter how sweet my words may sound, the lessons won't be learned if you don't mull it over, if you don't analyze it and think it over, if you don't do the work. I can't do the work for you. And the only answers in these wonderful, beautiful words that come out of my mouth stem from my experience of life, which is not your experience of life. And so I share it, but you have to do the work of pulling what is the truth for me. If you engage in blind faith and begin to think of me as some, wise man, I always love listening to Alex. It's kind of a lazy way out. I'm just pointing a finger at the moon. There's that image in the sutras.
See, here is the thing. Most people are like fish, and they are suffering. They suffer, right?
Yes.
So in this story, majority of people are fish. They don't do anything bad. They're like, but they suffer. They got eaten.
Out of ignorance. And that's one of the roots of suffering.
A little desire to go to the bigger pond,
Uh-huh.
right?
The desire wasn't bad.
But they didn't have the desire until
No,
they were pitched by the crane.
They verified by sending well on fish.
But they didn't verify the motives of the crane.
They did. They had intent. That's why they did. They checked everything. They double checked.
Well, they sent the one fish there and back again, and they convinced themselves that it was legitimate because of his trickery. He
The
was
lake,
still deceiving
yeah,
them.
the lake exists. Now, does the crane really want to take me there? That's what was not questioned except by the lobster.
Right.
But they were blinded. They were
blinded, yeah.
ignorant.
Exactly, like Mr. Biden.
We are ignorant. We are blinded by our desires. We don't know it all. And yet sometimes we continue to behave in life as if we know the right answers. Or that Alex has the right words.
We are blinded by these politicians.
Yeah, politicians, by just someone who has the gift of gab. And that's why then the Buddha himself said, do not just take my words alone. You have to work with these truths. You have to work and struggle with it yourself and make it your own.
So is the idea for the part that you said, like it's not inherently bad, but it's the expression and or intensity of it that when it gets it's problematic. Like,
Being seduced by it.
yeah. And is the idea that like being mindful of it, whatever it is supposed to like lessen or reduce
Step one.
the seductive power of it? It's step one?
It's step one. It's the I have to admit I have a problem.
Okay.
And that's the step one. I have to be aware. You're engaging in mindfulness meditation not so that you can become someone who can meditate for 4 hours straight. The goal of developing mindfulness is so that you can become aware, become awakened. Become aware of the desire first. If you don't know it's there, you're more easily seduced by it. You're more easily taken over by it. And you are then driven by your passions. So become aware. Step one.
In life, there is suffering. There it is.
And there it is. What we do about it, that's when I'll start talking about the Eightfold Path. You know.
See, but even, I think if I heard Leon correctly here, the fish may not have had that desire to move until the crane said something. It was either Leon or someone back here said that.
Yeah.
I don't recall. So are we, if someone arises a desire in us, are we supposed to not be trustworthy of that person right off the bat?
So I would say the crane tapped into a desire that already existed, not that the crane brought about a desire. The fish desired a better life. Period. The crane just told them, hey, I can give you a better life. And then that's where the downfall
fear
was.
in them by bringing up the drought, and that the lake was getting
Yeah,
dry.
and
So
motivated
all the
them.
fishes were just like, their minds were like seeing themselves in a dry lake bed, right?
Yeah.
Rather than being where they were in the water, safe.
Don't all these politicians do the exact same thing?
Yes.
Give you better life, free medical insurance, free this, free that. We'll
Yes.
give you this.
Fear the other.
Cost you much more. Here goes inflation.
They tap into our desires to get ahead, to improve our life.
My pins are around the neck of that as I turn the TV off, I put my junk mail in the trash, and just try to avoid it.
Which causes suffering too. Avoid it. Running from job. Open it. Be present.
I do scan it. I do scan it before I throw it away. Otherwise, it would throw my bill away or something. Oh, this looks pretty good. Oh, look, a free helicopter ride to a nice lake.
All right. Let's wrap up then. So, anytime you suffer, what is the desire? What's the underlying desire? Doesn't necessarily have to be a bad desire, just a desire. Be aware of it. Use the skill of mindfulness that you are practicing through the Meditation 101, through coming on the Sunday service, through coming here and practicing your meditation. You are developing a tool of awareness. And that's the first step. Become aware. As you become aware, then you can do something about it. Any announcements? We have the retreat coming up, right?
Yeah. We have one more meditation class next Saturday.
Not this Saturday,
Next Saturday. And then we have our Venerable Abbot's birthday / our 15th anniversary of the temple on the 4th of December. Retreats on the 10th of December. And on the 18th of December, we're doing a transmission ceremony of 3 refuge and 5 precepts for 3 of our members. So it's going to be a very auspicious event.
What day again?
18th.
The 18th.
Yeah, Thursday.
The 18th.
Nice.
rest of December.
And then our Lunar New Year will be January 21st, right?
Yes.
January 21st, and that's in the evening, and that's when we have the big party.
Woohoo.
The big get together to ring in the new year.
Mindfulness.
Sounds good.
And then December 6th will be our next Buddhism 101 class. We'll discuss the third noble truth, which is sort of, there is a way out of this mess. It's kind of the underlying message. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. That will be the last class for this year. We'll take a break because December is very active. We got a lot of stuff going on already in December. And then February, the first week of February, we'll start up again. All right? Good. Anything else? No? Fantastic. So, Master Tikwantri, can you please share the merit for us? Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.
For any positive karmic actions accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them for enlightenment.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody.
See you all in about 2 weeks. Have a good Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah, that's right. Come on,